Thank you very much, Tatiana, and welcome everyone. Great to see so many of you here, and really great to see a few familiar names. Hello. We have about 5 slides to start with, and as I will be going through these slides, you are more than welcome to put your questions in the Q&A section, and we will start to answer, or we'll start answering those questions immediately after I walk through this or a few slides. Let's do it. You know probably that, I'm sure you know, that in ITIL4 we have our different types of publications. We have books which don't include practice descriptions in ITIL4 or process descriptions, and we have practices published separately. And just to slightly correct the intro that we just had, of course, practices were not published this April. They were published back in 2019, and most of them in 2020, early 2020. But we indeed updated some of them. We are updating a few more. And this time, together with this update, they are also accompanied with respective training and certification. And that indeed was launched in April, and the first of them. And we also have, apart from the core books and the practices, we also have an ITIL maturity model. And we included some important components of that model in the updated practices, and this is why it's relevant to mention model here. You know that the practices were published, as I said, as separate documents back in 2019. So in May 2019, we published the first 4, then another group was published at the end of 2019, together with CDS and DPI publications, and later in the beginning of 2020, together with DSV and HVIT, we published the rest of the practices. Since then, we haven't updated them until this year, although one of the ideas that we had in mind when we were separating practices from the core publications was to be able to update them when needed. If the actual good practice of, let's say, change enablement is evolving, we didn't want to wait for another major update of ITIL or for another 10 years or so to make sure that it reflects the latest good practice in change enablement. So we published them as separate documents, independent, and even if some elements of these documents are examinable in managing professional modules, you know that examinable beats are very unlikely to change because it's only the purpose and the practice success factors. And we expected, actually, when we published them, that people would be using them, following their managing professional training or following their foundation training and using them for their actual service management practice in their organizations. And they were used less than we expected. And one of the reasons was because people in general prefer listening to slides read by someone else rather than reading the texts, even if they are not very long ones. And another reason was also that there was no training and certification product attached to these practices, which meant them less attractive and less, let's say, interesting to promote for training organizations. So we were listening to the feedback about it, and we decided to change it. And finally, this year, we offered training and certification based on the practices. And of course, we used this opportunity to also update the actual practice guides. Not all of them yet. So this year, we are releasing 15 practices are in updated format. And those 15 are included in the syllabus of ITIL Foundation. So we have these questions about how they were chosen. They were chosen based on what is examinable in the foundation training. It was just as good a reason, as good a criterion as any other. So we already, as Tatiana mentioned, released the first 5. They became publicly available in April, and these were incident problem, service request management, service desk, and monitoring and event management. This month, the next 5 will be released, first for you, and then obviously for the public. And this will be change enablement, release management, deployment management, service configuration management, and IT asset management. And we are now working or completing the work on the third group. And that third group will include service level management, continual improvement, information security management, supply management, and relationship management. And they will be released. We are aiming to release them by the end of September, but since we live in the VUCA world, we prefer announcing this as autumn. So every time something happens and we have to slightly postpone some activities that we planned for earlier. This is about the scope of update so far, and this is what we are doing this year. We don't have a clear roadmap for the next 19 practices yet, but these 15 are being released this year. And it's not only about restyling or changing the covers. It's also about changing the content of the practices, mostly amending and enriching it with new content rather than changing what already was there. Specifically, I have to say that the general information, all these purpose description, terms and concepts, scope, practice success factors, and metrics largely remains unchanged. Sometimes there are some changes in the terms and concepts, but not in the PSF, so metrics or purpose and description, which means nothing that is examinable as part of managing professional training or the digital and data strategy training. Nothing is affected by this update. Those products remain the same. However, you see, and they are highlighted with a different color, we have some amendments and we have sections that are significantly changed. First of all, it's value stream contribution section. You may remember from the old practices that the value stream part of the value stream and processes dimension was mostly addressed by a heat map, mapping this practice to service value chain. The heat map is gone now from the updated practices, but what is there instead is a whole section on contribution of this practice to the organization's service value streams, along with some recommendations on how to analyze and improve service value streams. In the organization and people part, we added more content and structured it more consistently when it comes to organizational solutions for the practice, whether you need a separate team for this, whether you should, or whether it's a good practice to assign certain responsibilities to already existing teams, what teams they would be, and what responsibilities we are talking about, that sort of information. For information and technology, we added a table that helps to deal with all the plethora of tools that we have there and to avoid memorization of the long table mapping activities to tools and their functionality. So this is something that we don't expect people to memorize in order to pass the exam. We have a smaller and more concise table to memorize. We amended, although it's not highlighted on the slide, partners and suppliers, and structured this in a more uniform way. And we also added two brand new sections. One is based on the ITIL maturity model. ITIL maturity model is not only a maturity model, it's also a capability model, and it includes capability criteria for each of the 34 practices. And until this practice update, these criteria were only available to our accredited consulting partners. And they use these criteria to conduct assessment and to help their customers to improve their service value systems. We decided to give a little sneak peek into this criteria for the general public, for the clients, for readers of the practices. And we included capability criteria for each of the practices in the respective practice guides, along with some recommendations on self-assessment of the practice capability level, and some general description of the model. And we ended the practices with a new section, which is called Recommendations for the Practice Success, which expands the already existing list of the guiding principles that we may remember being at this end of each practice guide, with practical recommendations for this particular practice mapped to the guiding principles and described in some extra details to just give general recommendations for how to develop this practice, how to adopt this practice, how to use this practice. This is what you probably already have found in the first 5 practices, if you happen to have a look at them, and maybe even you already have a training based on them. And that brings me to the last slide of this intro before we proceed to your questions. And this is a slide describing the updated training scheme. So in addition to already familiar ITIL managing professional and ITIL strategic leader, we now have a new pillar in this qualification scheme, which is ITIL practice manager. And ITIL practice manager is a designation addressed to the practitioners. And this designation is awarded upon a successful completion and a successful pass of the foundation exam, create, deliver, and support, CDS. It's shared between management and practitioner tracks, and any 5 of the practices. And this is where it's important to remind you, probably you have already had this from our previous communications, that these practice modules are available in 2 formats. You can deliver them, and your clients can consume them as 15, or you may have chosen only a few of them, individual 1 practice, 1 day modules with a 20 questions exam at the end. Or they can be available in these preset bundles that are exactly the same as the groups that we have already seen in one of the earlier slides. So monitor, support, and fulfill is already available. Plan, implement, and control will be available this month. And collaborate, assure, and improve will be available in a couple of months. And they are available as 3 days, 5 practice training, or as match and mix combination of any practices. And when a candidate successfully passes exams for CDS and any 5 practices in any combinations, in any format, then this candidate is awarded the designation of ITIL practice manager. And since we are looking at the scheme, it also allowed us to finally complete the route to the ITIL 4 master. And ITIL master is also now a designation, not a certification. So there is no additional training or additional exam attached to it. The designation of ITIL master is awarded upon our successful achievement of the 3 underlying designations. So if someone is already strategic leader and managing professional, then after they successfully study and pass an exam for 5 practices in any format, then they will have 2 designations, ITIL practice manager and ITIL master. And in this combination, ITIL master confirms that someone knows enough about the practical details for at least 5 practices, that they know all the aspects of service management from the managing professional track, and that they are able not only to design, devise, but also to apply and implement a digital and data strategy. Because as you probably know, for digital and data strategy, part of the assessment is the Bloom's Level 4 assessment, or based on the practical assignments in the course. So ITIL masters are those who know a lot about what ITIL says, but also are able to apply it in particular circumstances based on their digital and data strategy training and assessment.